Hello, I'm David Lockington, Music Director of the Pasadena Symphony, and I'm just thrilled to welcome to this extraordinary flat screen JoAnn Faletta, who is the Music Director of the Buffalo Philharmonic, and Nokuthula Ngwenyama, or Tula, who is one of the best violists you will ever hear and a fabulous composer. And we are here to celebrate and to talk about, reminisce about Adolphus Hailstork, whose birthday is coming up April the 17th. He's going to be 80 years old, and he is one of the most important composers of our generation. So I'm going to start with JoAnn, because I know you've had an extraordinary journey with Adolphus Hailstork. You were just saying that you moved to Norfolk, or you were working in Norfolk right around the same time that he moved there.
That's right. That's right. And this was 30 years ago now that I started my tenure with the Virginia Symphony, and he was in Virginia Beach, and then actually moved into my apartment building, my condo building. So we were neighbors all of this time. But I can't tell you how beautiful it was to have a composer who we considered ours. Now, I know that Dolph actually belongs to New York. You know, he was born in Rochester, so we celebrate him in Buffalo too. But he, in Virginia, he was ours. He taught here. He wrote for us. We were like his orchestra. I mean, we belonged to him, and all of the significant things about our journey, he was a part of. I mean, most recently, when we opened the Virginia Symphony season this year, after a year of silence, the very first concert, we asked Dolph what he wanted us to play. And he very sensitively said, please play the Adagio. And that was in memory for all of the people that we lost. And I thought how beautiful of him to request that. But when we went to Carnegie Hall for the first time, he wrote a piece for us, a fantastic piano concerto. When we celebrated the 400th birthday of America at Jamestown, he wrote a piece for us. He wrote a piece for my 20th anniversary. It was amazing. He wrote pieces that were about us. He wrote a piece called An American Port of Call, which you probably know, David, which is about Norfolk, Virginia. And I don't think there's any other piece ever written about Norfolk, Virginia. So he sort of put us on the map, because a lot of people have played that piece. So he's ours. We adore him.
Yeah. Well, he's just a remarkable composer. And talking about the breadth of his expression is very special. I mean, he's a very deep human being who is able to bring it all to the game, to the compositions that he writes. And so, Tula, I want to ask you about your experience with Dolph. And, you know, as a composer, I imagine he has got to have had some kind of an influence on you.
Well, I was actually introduced to his work by the piece that he wrote for viola or clarinet and piano called Sanctum. And Beverly Baker was an early champion of this work. And for recitals and things, I was always looking for nice programming. And I found out about his writing and that Beverly was playing this, and I thought, oh, I'd love to learn his work. And it was really through that, and then through correspondence with him, and just feeling his generosity of spirit, his kindness, but also just real seriousness and sincerity, all at the same time, that he brought to his writing and his expression, or that he brings to his writing and expression. But while we were working together, I've always just been very touched by his influence. And then, of course, just learning from the writing itself, what to do with the voices and how to use the interplay between the piano and the instrument, viola or clarinet. And then it's just touching to know that he grew up as a chorister, and that piece that he wrote really brings those experiences. And then now my son is actually in the Phoenix Boys Choir, so I get to see my son be a chorister, and it actually helps me to understand the piece a little bit more too. It's very sweet, really very touching and moving to be able to work with him. And I always have had an open correspondence. I felt like I could write him, ask any question, and always get a thoughtful response. That really means a lot to me.
Well, let me ask you, JoAnn, about this process of working with a composer. I've so enjoyed getting my hands dirty in other people's music. And composers have been remarkably open to suggestions if something doesn't work or if you think something could be emphasized. I mean, even with some composers talking about the structure, if something is overweighted in a certain place or something. Have you had that kind of experience with Dolph, or have you just said, carte blanche, do it, we'll play it?
Well, there has been some of that. I mean, he's given us pieces and we've loved them and played them, but he is extremely open, as you say. He's a great human being, and he has so much inner groundedness and tranquility and peacefulness inside. It's not like he's trying to prove anything. His music is great. And so if we make a suggestion, as you say, maybe we should move this here so that it doesn't seem to be static at any point, or maybe we could double that, or how would you feel about us, taking it up an octave? When I first started making those suggestions to him, I was a little frightened because there are some composers who are very offended by that. But Dolph wasn't. Dolph let me be part of the creative process. It meant a lot to me because I'm not a composer, but just to have that little tiny bit of insight into his process and to hear him talk to me about it and be willing to try something different, and in a very happy way. I mean, he smiles and he's just very engaged in the most positive energy. And some of his pieces are quite sad. I mean, they're pieces of deep, profound tragedy, but yet his own energy is always filled with joy and possibility and youthfulness. It's amazing to be in the same room as he is.
Yes, exactly. So I wanted to ask you, Tula, about the latest piece that I know you've written and recorded, your viola concerto.
Oh, yes.
Right? That's very exciting. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it started with Sonoran Storm, which was at first for solo viola, but I heard it for viola and orchestra. I just had to bring the orchestra down onto a solo viola. And so I was able to incorporate more nature concepts and into the first two movements, which are kind of a combined movement, like maybe a loose ABA, but that sounds too organized.
And you've already recorded it.
It's already been recorded with Janáček Philharmonic, and Anthony Armour is conducting. And I have the last movement is up on SoundCloud, but I'm still editing the first two movements.
Before we wrap this up, I do want everybody to know that JoAnn and the orchestra and the composer and the chorus all recently won a Grammy. For
Richard Daniel Poor. Richard.
Fabulous. Oh, wow.
Congratulations. What is the again?
It's called The Passion of Yeshua. It's set to the Passion Gospel writings, and but in a very different way, in a way that introduces the voice of women for the first time into that narrative, and also is sung partly in Hebrew to reflect the real world of the time, not the Europeanized world that it became. So I think Richard really, he's a big favorite of mine, but this is just a masterpiece.
That is so exciting. Well, congratulations to you both on your amazing accomplishments. And thank you so much for being with us just to acknowledge the greatness of Adolphus Hailstork. So if we've got our champagne glasses, we can just toast him right now.
Yes.
And happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear
Adolphus.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, Dolph.
What
Happy
a mess.
birthday.
Thank you, everybody. This was great fun. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Tula, see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I am so excited to have on the screen, not in the flesh, of course, but two of my favorite musicians. Janice is an extraordinary soprano. We've worked together a number of times, and she's one of my favorite singers. And James is one of my favorite composers. And they happen to both at the same time, at least I suspect, be in the Baltimore area. Is that true right now?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Yes.
Janice is doing a bait and switch, I think.
I think I'm in California, but I'm not.
Oh dear. And actually Baltimore was where I got to experience on a larger stage than in Denver, and more importantly, with the Baltimore Symphony, the music of Adolphus Hailstork. And we're here to talk about Adolphus Hailstork, whose birthday it is. His 80th birthday is coming up, April the 17th. And I wanted just to get a few people together to say a few words about him, what impact he may have had on your lives, and because he's had a huge impact on my life. So I'm going to ask first of all, Janice, how has Dolph's music influenced you? I mean, he's written a lot for voice. Have you sung much of his music?
You know, I assigned one of my seniors at Baltimore School for the Arts his song "Create in Me" that is in this wonderful art songs by African-American composers, selected by Margaret Simmons and Janine Wagner. It's an anthology. His music is very, it's the meters. Always the meters don't just come, you know, like that. He wants to mix it up. It might be, you know, it might be at 5, 7. You know, he throws out these very complex rhythms. So it's challenging for me as a vocalist to really work on his vocal music because of that. He has, like, the Create in Me is also a little bit challenging, but it's a little bit more straightforward. And so I have found that that's the song that I go to. But some of his other vocal music is really hard. I'm just going to put it out there. It's difficult because of the rhythms. Now the piece that we did, Done Made My Vow, when I first got the score for that and started working on it, I thought, first of all, the text was so profound and deep. And I was so proud of Adolphus at the time. I was younger, a young, you know, African-American soprano. And I was just so proud of him for putting on paper and putting in the purview of the world this music that was expressing the deep sentiment that it does about spirituality, about, you know, pride in our culture as African people, and to be able to stand on the stage and sing that with, you know, with Nathan Carter, you know, conducting, and the Baltimore Symphony, or even with you conducting, it felt freeing, and it just felt important. Those are words that come to my mind when I think about his music. Just important, because he was saying things as a composer at that time that really had been said maybe by other composers in different ways, but not as direct. I feel like his music is direct and just very profound in the way that it expresses the importance of having pride in African-American culture. And that's what I feel when I sing his piece, is his choral pieces, that is, that they just really put it out there, the pride and the culture of African-American people. And I'm just proud of him, you know, because he's been one of those, he's contemporary. I know he's 80 now, but he wasn't 80 when I met him. He was like my age now. He must have been like maybe 54, 55. And, you know, he was just doing his thing. So I'm very, very proud of him just laying the way for another wonderful composer who we have right here with us today, Dr. James Lee. So that's what I would say.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so both of you are deeply spiritually committed, and James, your music follows a little bit the trajectory of Dr. Hailstork, but with a very different sort of focus, it seems. I mean, his music has definitely got a sort of social conscience running through it, and a lot of character studies of people that he has felt are important through history. Your music has got more of a sort of a personal devotional quality with extraordinary titles. I just love your titles. It's just, they're ecstatic just in themselves. And then the music just blows me away. Your music blows me away. So tell me a little bit how Adolphus's music has affected you.
Well, my first experience listening to Adolphus, his music, was back in probably maybe 2001, 2002 at the Detroit Symphony when I was a student at the University of Michigan. Leslie Dunner premiered his Symphony No. 2, and I just remember being so inspired. He actually, Adolphus Hailstork, composed that work, and then he revised it after a trip to West Africa. And I was really stunned to see what he had accomplished, especially in that last movement. And he comes up with these marimba passages and the very, very percussive aspects of what he did. It was really inspiring me as a student to really continue to work very hard to develop my own art as a composer. And little did I know or even think that I would be programmed with him in the future. You know, one time, we were on the same program with the Detroit Symphony in 2013. He had a big work for chorus and orchestra. And then my work, Sukkot, the Orion's Nebula, was also on the concert. So we had a nice time chatting and getting to know each other's work a little bit more. So he's always been an encouragement to me. I've sent him emails over the years. He's given me some career advice and some compositional advice. So it's always been fun to really exchange messages with him. But then, you know, in recent times, so I've been at Morgan State University since 2005. And in my history of Black music class, I've enjoyed, and my students have really enjoyed listening to his songs of love and justice. Mm-hmm. Those particular songs taken from texts by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And there's one in particular, I think, Decisions. He has such a thick texture in the piano. It's in 3/4. And as it continues to just build up to the climax, then there's this huge crashing chord, like very orchestral. And then the soprano sings this minor third on a D to B. She says, "What are you doing?" You know, so it's just the way that he really captures those texts. And then as Janice was saying earlier, one thing that I also show my students is If We Must Die, the song taken from text by Claude McKay. And that one, when you hear that, you talk about mixed meters and the density of the sound where it's just wonderful what he's done. So I always really loved and appreciated his music. And then hearing, I was on a concert with him in Cincinnati Symphony in 2019. And Thomas Wilkins performed his first symphony. And it was very nice to hear such a different, you know, a different texture, like more of a Mozart or Beethoven-sized orchestra in terms of instrumentation, hearing that in comparison to his second and third symphonies. So, I mean, I just love his work, and I'm very happy to see him continuing to write, you know, in his 70s and now 80, you know, so it's been a nice journey for me in my own growth.
Well, and you point out something that has always struck me about the greatest composers, and that is how broad their palette is and how emotionally they can go anywhere. You know, it feels like they're tapping into the breadth and the depth of the human spirit and how we connect to the divine. And he's able to do that everywhere. I mean, you've described great complexity, both of you, and you've described simplicity and a soulfulness, and that to me is a mark of a great artist. And then, of course, how important is it that great people are also incredibly modest? I mean, they know how good they are, they know what they're offering, but he's a very delightful man who doesn't blow his own trumpet at all. And he's, as you said, James, he's just always so incredibly encouraging. He's been very encouraging to me. So, you know, it's very touching when you have the privilege of sort of being in the presence of greatness. That's how it feels to me. So I'm glad you both feel the same way. Well, and Janice, you know, one of my fond memories was doing the Four Last Songs with you of Strauss. And I don't know if it was the first time, but it may have been close to it. But
I think so.
You know, the richness and ease of the quality of her voice was so inspiring. And even though the orchestration is very thick and dense, your voice just expanded and enveloped everybody's ears in the hall. It was absolutely magical. And I've seen you've done it all over the place with all the major orchestras too.
Yes, I was actually supposed to sing it this season with Annapolis, but it got canceled because of the pandemic. But I hope to revise that with them in 2022. I talked with the conductor, and he said we'll do it, or we'll do that, or we'll do maybe the Knoxville Summer in 2022. Yeah, that's another great piece. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And James, you've got things coming up rescheduled from Detroit, is that right? What have you got coming?
I do. I do. I have a piece called American that's like American that's being premiered this fall. It was canceled because of the pandemic for April premiere last year, but it's on schedule for this fall. And this is something that I've really been interested in lately. I've been doing so much research about connections between African Americans or Afro Americans and Indigenous Americans. So that actually has a few, or maybe a couple of Negro spirituals kind of hidden in the texture, especially in the flute in that piece. And I asked them to program it with the New World Symphony also.
Oh, nice.
Because there's one comment that Dvorak had in terms of he couldn't really distinguish between Native American melodies and or Negro American, as he called it at the time, melodies. So that is something being played in Detroit and in the Orlando Philharmonic this season.
Terrific. Well, that's very exciting.
You know, I'm sorry, David,
no.
But I was struck by the information that Dvorak was a friend of Burleigh when he came to visit back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Because he was a friend of his, he started to incorporate, like you were talking about, these African American, these Negro spiritual melodies into his writing. The Going Home melody is, I think, one of those things that he was inspired by Burleigh to write, and that's very interesting how the experience of African Americans and Native Americans has influenced, classical composers, at least as far as Dvorak was concerned. I was really struck by that when I found that out.
Yeah, very powerful.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being here today, and wish you all the best as we get through hopefully the end of this pandemic, and get to be out and about and performing again and having more performances of your work. So thank you once again. And if we had glasses, we could just raise them now to Adolphus. So happy birthday. Yeah.
Happy birthday, Adolphus.
Happy birthday, Adolphus.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dolph. Happy birthday to you.